Hi, and welcome back to Jewelry Making Made Easy by Ellen. Recently, I had a customer send me a message asking me why her memory wire bracelet, she was trying to make a triple loop memory wire bracelet using the tube beads, and I had said I had never tried to make one before, but actually I had, I just didn't remember. She said it was not sitting right, and it was bothering me why it shouldn't sit right, and the only thing that I could think of at the time was using a 2.5-inch memory wire, because that's what I use for a triple wrap bangle bracelet, and usually I use beads and rubber tubing, which is a lot more flexible. However, it was bothering me. Somehow in my memory I remembered I must have tried doing a triple with the triple loop with the tube beads before, and yes, I had. When I had a few minutes, I wanted to play around, and I did this triple loop, and it actually came out a hot mess, because I wasn't thinking it through before I did it. I just went ahead and did it, and it does not sit right. And the reason mine didn't, I'm not sure why hers didn't, but I think this video just might help her. This is not sitting the way it should, right next to each other. One is up, one is down, but like I said, it's a hot mess. So I went about trying it with seed beads just to see, and I used this as a guide. I do have a video for this bangle bracelet that I call a dangle bracelet, and it sits so nicely on your arm. And the tube, I'm thinking the tubes sit so nicely on the side. If you're going to use memory wire in the tubes, that's probably the way to go. So I did a triple loop with tubes and seed beads. Actually, I did a few. I'll show you the others. And it sits close to perfectly. And I suppose the tubes could sit on the top, but I'm not crazy about that. I like the beads on the top. Now, there's a couple more here. When I get started, I just don't stop. I did it with some multicolor seed beads, and it sits on my wrist very nicely also, using the plan that I made up. And I did one with 4mm check and Swarovski crystal. Also sits very nicely. I don't know how many different size beads you can actually use, but I do know that if you plan your bracelet with the tubes sitting on the side, it sits nice and neat on your wrist. And I would imagine you could do 3 loops, 4 loops, 5 loops, as many as you like. So what I am here to tell you today is what I figured out. I figured, since this sits so nicely, I figured the top of the bracelet should be, and the top of every one of the 3, 4, or 5 loops should be probably about the same size as this. And the top, I have 1 3/4 inches, and then a tube bead on each side. So that's what I did with these. These are 1 3/4 inches on the top. On the bottom is 3 inches. Why? I don't know, but it just sits perfectly, the 3 inches. Let me turn that around so that the 3 inches are on the bottom. And when I start the bracelet, I start with half of that, which is 1.5 inches. This one is 1.5 inches, and then these are 3 inches. So 3 inches across the bottom, 1.5 inches, 1 3/4 inches on the top, and it sits very nicely with the 2.5-inch memory wire. And I'm just going to start the bracelet because I will put in the notes on the video exactly what I just told you, the 1 3/4 inches, the 3 inches, and the 1.5 inches on the beginning and the end. And the only reason I want to start it is if you have not watched the other video, I just want to show you how to cut the memory wire. And the most important thing, I think, working with memory wire is it is a tough material, and if you hold your round nose plier the way I show you, it's really easy to make a loop on the end. Now you can make these with end caps that you glue on the ends, which I did on only one of the ends of this bracelet. My computer's trying to tell me something. I have no idea what it is, but it's not coming off, but I really don't trust them because I have purchased bracelets with end caps and worked with a couple that after a while they just came off. You have to have a really, really super heavy duty glue, and this one seems to be staying on. But I prefer to make a loop on the end and hang a charm on it. It just gives the bracelet a little bit more pizzazz with a couple little charms hanging on the bottom. So let's get started. I won't do the whole bracelet because that's not what this is about. This is just about showing you what to do to have it lay evenly. So to make the 3 loops, I want to, the lighting not that great right now. I'm relying on some sunlight and some lamps, and the sun seems to be getting covered with a cloud. But anyway, here's the end of my memory wire. So I pull out 1, 2, 3. See if there's 3 loops. Look down by my pinky, and then I want this to meet the top one and maybe go over. This is my first end, and I want this last one to go just past it a tiny little bit. Well, not a tiny, a little bit. I always leave extra space on the memory wire. I'd rather have a little left over and cut it off than run out of room. That would be terrible. Then I'd have to start all over again, and I think I actually made too many loops. Okay, we have 1, 2, 3 on the bottom, and I did. I cut too many loops. Let's see. This memory wire can mess you up a little bit. So there's 3, and I should have cut it here, so I have a total of 3 loops. So I will do that, leaving some extra space. I counted too many loops before. Now I'll just do a few because I have the bracelet here to show you, and I did not take any charms out. I've got some crosses right there. I'll use that. We'll start with the end of the memory wire, and I have showed people before, and don't mind this. This is just covering up some scratches. I was packing Christmas decorations, and I only covered it up because it's ugly. All you have to do is touch me. I'm 70 years old. I take blood thinners, and I turn purple. So, and this got all scratched up and bloody from packing Christmas decorations. But here's the very end of my memory wire and my round nose pliers. Oh yeah, forgot to mention, what you will be using is a very heavy duty wire cutter. Oops. And a round nose plier. Those are the only tools you need, and of course I'm using 2.5 inch diameter memory wire. So I take my round nose pliers and I hold them with my palm up, and then I turn my hand a little bit to the right. Now I'm right-handed. You would be doing opposite actually, because the camera is in front of me. This looks like left-handed, but I'm right-handed. I hold the pliers with palm up, turn it a little bit to the right, and grab the end of the memory wire, leaving a tiny little, let's see, can you see that? Tiny little bit of wire hanging off, and just turn it around so it's like a 3/4 loop, and I hang on a charm. And then I close up my loop. And when I'm working with these memory wire bracelets, the loop is not perfect, but you know what? Nobody's gonna notice. It's good enough. When I'm working with memory wire and using a loop, I like to put on each end a 5mm round, and I'll show you why. Because if you're using smaller beads, I'm just going to let that go around and around and around until it gets to the end. If it ever gets to the end. Because that kind of blocks the loop and keeps any beads from, if you're using a seed bead or something small, from coming. If that loop opens up a little tiny bit, a seed bead would fall off. If you're using spacer beads, that might fall off, but that 5mm round kind of protects it. So back to the other end. Then I just start stringing on my beads. Now, like I said, you can use any size. I've used size 6/0 seed beads on these two. I used 6mm pearls on this one, and I used 4mm Swarovski bicones and 4mm check beads with some spacer beads on this one, and they sit very nicely. So I've got my loop and my charm, and I'm going to start by stringing on, and I'll write this in the notes, 1.5 inches, because these ends are going to be on the bottom. There's two ends, 1.5 inches and 1.5 inches, and the bottom on this pattern is 3 inches. So, and I'm using spacer beads and pearls. I'm kind of duplicating this. So I'm putting on how many? 6 6mm pearls, 6, and some spacer beads. So that's 1, and a spacer bead, 2, spacer, 3, and a spacer. I don't put a spacer before the 2 bead. So there's a pearl and a spacer. The spacers are in the middle, and there isn't one on the end. And I just want to get 1.5 inches, depending on what beads you use. You're going to have to figure that out. What I do is I string it on fire line, my beads, to figure out how many beads per inch, even though I do have a chart, but I always add seed beads or spacers. Okay, we've got 4, and a spacer. Is there a spacer on there? No. I can't walk and chew gum, so every time I start talking, I lose count. So that's 5, and a spacer. These are 4mm spacers, by the way. And I will have kits for this one bracelet. If requested, I will make kits for some other. You can just message me and ask what you're interested in. And if I carry those beads, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 is the last one. So that's 1.5 inches for the bottom. Now you don't have to push it all the way around. they'll push themselves around as you're going. 1.5 inches, then a tube bead, and on this particular bracelet I don't have a after the last pearl, wherever that is. I don't have a spacer bead, just putting on my tube, and then I'm going to start again, only this one is going to be the top, and the top is going to be 1 3/4 inches, and I believe that is 7 pearls and spacers. So I'll try to do this quick. 1, there's no such thing, 2. Now glass pearls are a little tough. One side always seems to be tinier than the other. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, without a spacer on the end. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. See, lost count. Spacer and 1 more pearl. So that set is 1 3/4 inches, and that's what's going to sit on the top. Then another tube bead, which is the opposite side. And I will push it all around just so that I can show you. How it winds up. Here we have half of the bottom, which is the 1.5 inches. Then this is the side, whoops, 1.5 inches, the side, and then the top is 1 3/4 inches, and then the other side. And the bottom is actually now 3 inches of pearls, which would be 11 pearls and spacers. So let me see where we are in this. We're already at 22 minutes, so I'm just going to show you on this again. Wrap it around my wrist. How it sits perfectly. You have 1.5 inches, 1 3/4 inches, and there's a 2 bead in between that sits on the side, and then there are 3 inches for the bottom, and another 2 bead, 1 3/4 inches for the top, a 2 bead, 3 inches again, and a 2 bead. And if you're doing 3, when you get to the end, so you have, I'll put the bottom on the top so you can see it. You have 1.5 inches here and 1.5 inches here. So I did 2 sets of 3 inches, 1.5, 1.5 makes 3. And look how nicely that sits for a triple loop bangle. And I have an average size wrist, so this would definitely fit average size or larger. I think you can see how much room there is in here. So that's our little video for today. Hopefully I can come up with some ideas to help, or feel free to ask for help in some areas that you're having a hard time with, and I'll see if I can design a bracelet to help you out. Thank you and have a great day, and I hope you're having an excellent new year.